Good evening, everyone, and thank you all for joining our special August 24th Palm Springs Airport Commission meeting at 5:30 p.m. I will ask our executive director to lead us for the Pledge of Allegiance. Ulysses.
Thank you. We can all please stand. I pledge allegiance of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Ulysses. And I see that, Nadia, the agenda was posted on August 19, 2021. Nadia, can we have a roll call, please?
Yes. Commissioners Adams,
Present.
Breslin. Please turn on the microphone. Thank you. Budillo. Burke,
Present.
Corcoran,
Here.
Dada,
Here.
Feltman,
Here.
Freeman,
Yep.
Hedrick,
Here.
Hearn,
Here.
yes. Hughes,
Here.
Martin, Miller,
Here.
Philbrook,
Here.
Bai,
Here.
Schmitz,
Here.
Suero, and Wheel.
Thank you, Nadia. Can we get a motion to approve the acceptance of the agenda?
So moved. I second.
So we have a motion and second, all in favor.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, Nadia, do we have anyone to speak this evening on public comments?
No, we do not receive a
Yes,
request.
I do. This is Bill Reeson.
We did not receive a request.
Can you hear me? This is Bill Reeson.
Yes, I can hear you, Bill.
Okay. Thank you very much for recognizing me. As most of you know, I'm past commissioner. My 6-year term expired here a couple months ago. And I just want to express my appreciation and my joy for being a commissioner for the last 6 years. I want to congratulate my successor, Mr. Wheel, which I see he's not here, unfortunately. And just say thank you to the commission and the staff. I especially want to thank some people that have helped me through my experiences as a commissioner for the last 6 years, starting with Nadia and our past executive director, Tom Nolan, and our current director, Ulysses, who all have helped me very much in my serving as a commissioner for the last 6 years. So with that, I just want to say thank you and welcome all the new commissioners, which many of you I don't know because you're all new. But I'm still around, and being a pilot, local pilot here, and a user of the airplane of the airport, I plan on keeping informed of what's going on at the airport, and I'll be around. So thank you very much for all your help, the people that I've worked with in the last 6 years, and thank you very much for everybody.
Can you hear me?
Bill.
Can you
Thank
hear me?
Bill, for your
Mr.
6 years
Reason?
of your
Yes.
service to the commission.
Mr. Reason, my name is Tom Wheel and I am present.
Oh, you are? I didn't see you. Where?
I'm up in the corner, I think. At any rate, thank you for your nice comments.
Oh, okay. And I wish you the best in representing the city of Rancho Mirage, as I've done for the last 6 years.
Thank you, sir.
Having said that, we move on to the executive director's report, Ulysses Aguirre.
Thank you. This being a special meeting, we did not put together any presentations to try to keep the meeting short in respect of everybody's time here for the month of August. And so with that, we will resume our normal updates as well as Daniel's presentations at the September meeting. We'll recap everything, but I do want to share just a couple of highlights. The Ticket Wing project was completed on September 12th with a certificate of occupancy. I'm sorry, August 12th with a certificate of occupancy. Southwest started processing passengers at the South Lobby starting last week, and the airlines have moved into their airline ticket offices back there. So for all general purposes, outside of some punch list items, the project is complete. Some of you may have seen through the local news as well as in information that we sent out last week. We had a ribbon cutting ceremony yesterday to recognize the completion of the project. 4 council members, including the mayor, were here recognizing the completion of the $36 million project. So I think it was a nice event. And also Chairman Dada represented the Airport Commission in that ribbon cutting ceremony. So we think that was a success yesterday. Passenger boarding bridges, just want to let you know, 2 passenger boarding bridges have been completed. They are now in operation. We have 2 more in play, and within the next 2 weeks, they should be brought online and we'll be halfway through. July stats, many of you probably had a chance to take a look at them. They are very, very positive for the month of July, 32% over July of 2019, which makes July of 2021 the busiest month in the airport's history. So that's 2 months in a row where we hit that milestone.
July was the busiest month in the airport history, not just compared
July.
to 30%
Month
up
of
over
July.
2019.
I'm sorry? Somebody made,
Yeah, can we have some mute your, please? I can hear some background stuff.
sorry, so there was no question then on that one. Okay, okay. The other part is we had a job fair today where we had 14 airport tenants and stakeholders, including 2 taxi cab companies, Atlantic and Signature. Many of the tenants were very successful in identifying new employees. Some of those individuals filled all of their positions today, and others have very good leads for future employment here going into the season, which is what we wanted to accomplish. And so that was a big success today. My hat's off to Daniel and Victoria for putting that off and making it a good success. Last issue is just Flair Airlines last week announced that they are going to start service to a second city, in addition to Vancouver. They are not going to serve Edmonton starting December 17th with seasonal flights as well. So those are just a couple of things that I wanted to bring to the commission's attention. Chairman Dada, that completes my report today.
Thank you so much, Ulysses. Any question for Ulysses? Seeing none, do we have our CEO of our city, Justin Clifton, because I don't see him on my screen.
Mr. Chair, I am present this evening.
Thank you. So we will let you take over from here.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. First, let me apologize that you're here in August in part because I was not able to stay for the duration of the last meeting. I anticipated I might be able to provide an update earlier in the agenda, but there were some procedural things with the last meeting that took a little bit of time, and I did have a conflict and had to leave partway through. So thanks very much for your patience and rescheduling. My understanding is that you'd like an update on the boxing club and progress and maybe a little more deeper discussion about that issue. So I'm happy to facilitate that. First, let me just say by way of an update that I believe we are a matter of days away from Martha's Village and Kitchen opening up operations at the boxing club. So you may recall that initially the plan going back to April of this year was to relocate the well in the desert that currently has operations on Kaye and Celia, to relocate that operation to the boxing club. I think actually April might have just been the direction to find another location, and I believe it was later on in the year, perhaps. Maybe it was April. I apologize. I get my months a little confused. But anyway, the decision was to relocate the well, but over the course of time, it became apparent to City Council that we needed to work with another provider. I think that was in part because of some of the experience at their current location and some of the secondary impacts, but it was also determined over the course of negotiations that for a variety of reasons, it would be beneficial to contract with a new provider and partner with a new provider. So that's where Martha's Village and Kitchen came to the table. They were a partner with Well in the Desert for some time. They do operate a more full suite of service navigation center out of Indio. I've toured that facility. My perception is that they run a tight ship. So we started having conversations with Martha's about how to move services over and improve services, both in terms of outcomes, which was a focus of City Council. They wanted to know not just how many meals were served or how many individuals were seen at these facilities, but they were more interested in how many people are actually getting worked out of homelessness, that are receiving the kinds of services they really need to get better and improve. That's certainly things like mental illness and mental health services, addiction services, job services, and others. So one of the things I've been impressed about with Martha's is that they do a good job providing those suite of services. So from there, I started having some visits with their team, as well as Jay Barada, our Community and Economic Development Director, who really is more directly overseeing some of these programs. And the conversation with Martha's was, how do we improve substantially over what we had with the last operation? Those conversations had been ongoing, so it's a little difficult for me to recount absolutely everything, but the bottom line is this is an organization with a deeper bench. It's a larger team. They're more accustomed to the kinds of outcomes that we're focused on, to seeking and receiving substantial grant resources, and just generally have a broader program. So when we started discussing the specific scope of work, minimizing secondary impacts was a focal point. Martha's has a track record of leveraging services for appropriate behavior. Now, they're careful to emphasize that they don't control human beings, right? So I'm certainly not suggesting that we won't know that there is a homeless navigation center or access center at this location. But they demonstrated that they have previously leveraged services successfully to encourage better behavior. So as an example, if somebody was continually, say, loitering or doing worse at airport property, Martha's would be able to say that that individual is suspended from services. And frankly, that would likely mitigate the need for them to be close by anyway. Additionally, Martha's is enhancing services that are really, I don't want to mischaracterize, things with the Well in the Desert. I think they've provided services that are needed to some extent, due to a large extent, but I think some would characterize it as a little more enabling. Martha's has, in my opinion, a more concentrated effort and track record in improving people's lives. So to that end, they are proposing, expanded services. And in fact, I'll come back to council September 9th and discuss a new financial arrangement with Martha's that contemplates the city dedicating more funding to this effort than it did previously to Well in the Desert, so that they can have the right number of social service related kinds of programs, but also, as one small example, dedicated security staff. So whereas the Well in the Desert largely provided security training to individuals that worked with their operations, who were often individuals who were either very recently and previously homeless, or perhaps currently homeless working with the operation, Martha's feels strongly that you need independent security that doesn't have other jobs or other affiliations with the organization. So that comes with an added cost, but we think will also lead to a better outcome. So over the course of time, we've negotiated a scope of work. City Council has delegated the responsibility to ultimately signing that contract with that scope of work. I'm prepared to do so. Council will make the final appropriation for this new partnership and this request for additional funding. All of this is in the spirit of improving substantially over the conditions that we saw previously at Well in the Desert at the current location. And I'm optimistic that we'll see that. The last thing I'll mention before I turn it over to questions is that we are also stepping up on our side of things. So that means we are having more frequent meetings with Martha's as the provider than we did with Well in the Desert. I've talked to our police chief, our acting police chief, and that team about having a stronger presence. One advantage we have in this location is that we actually kind of abut the parking lot of the boxing club and can use that to frequently drive through and do area checks and have really regular communication with Martha's. So we understand what our airport team is seeing on the ground, what others in the area, including us at City Hall, are seeing on the ground, what the police are seeing, sharing that information with Martha's, on a case-by-case basis. We have some police community service officer type positions where they know the homeless community very well. I think Martha's is prepared again to not only leverage service, but really appeal to the population that uses those services that, we need to have a better outcome to keep these services going. So bottom line is we're all focused on improving the situation that we saw at the well. We have just a few things left to do at the building to commence operations. I will note that Martha's is also operating a 24-hour cooling and warm shelter with meals at a local church for the second year in a row. And that operation, I think we've received a couple of complaints, but nothing substantial. And if you drive by that location, I think you'll see that it's vastly different from the experience that we've seen with Well in the Desert near Barristo Park. So all indications are that this will be vastly improved, and we'll continue, that effort to ensure that that actually happens. Questions?
Okay.
Peter, you need to unmute.
Yeah, my question is, this is airport property. How is the airport compensated? Is this going to be
I was watching the Zoom.
lease or purchase?
The older, some of the commissioners are older, and so they're always start like, there's always like, you need to unmute. Unmute.
I'm sorry, Daniel, can you please mute your phone?
Yep.
So thank you for the question. I do understand. I'm working with our legal team. We do understand that this is airport property. So I don't contemplate a purchase, and I don't contemplate a traditional lease per se, because this is really a partnership of the city providing programming at this location. And I should have mentioned that I don't want to misconstrue things, but we see this as a temporary location. So we are currently working with the county to either procure vacant land or land that could be retrofitted to have a more complete navigation center built. At the point when that happens, we would expect to relocate these programs once again out of the boxing club and into what we would see as a permanent and much more comprehensive, a housing first type solution. So in the meantime, depending on whether or not this qualifies as kind of a temporary situation, we would make a lease payment likely from the city to the airport, but we're still finalizing those details.
Have you, through your legal department, ascertained what the FAA guidelines are on that?
Yes. So that's still what I'm working with our legal department to determine. Again, there is, it's not quite the same as it would be to just lease to a private, company. This is essentially a city service out of a city facility, contracted with a partner to provide some of the actual workforce, et cetera. So that changes things slightly. But we are working with the legal team to review all FAA regulations, including some of those that might be affiliated with grant sources, et cetera, to make sure that we do that correctly.
Thank you.
Question.
Any other questions?
Yes, I have a question.
Go ahead, David.
Can we, Justin, can you tell us what the hours, the operating hours will be at the center?
I would need to look, but my recollection, and this is fairly accurate but approximate, is 9 to 5. This is a daytime operation, and I'll look specifically for that scope while we're continuing to talk. But last time we discussed it, that's what they were looking at. While the other operation changed hours kind of substantially by season and other circumstances, we're proposing something more regular and reliable, but it's essentially daytime.
Question?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. I understand that this is something different than has been done before, but as far as resident reach out with this, you mentioned there are some complaints, but is there kind of a plan of how we should perhaps publicize successes or just to let the neighborhood know about the partnership?
Thank you very much for the question. We have tried, unfortunately, some of this has played out in editorials and other places. We've created a couple of frequently asked questions types documents that we can give people when they inquire about these things with the city. We will certainly issue press releases and other things. We have a regular outreach meeting, 2 of them actually, one that is pretty much with providers and city staff, to kind of make sure that we are convening providers and not just Martha's and the Well, but Jewish Family Services and others that provide services in the area, a CBAG, to make sure that we're leveraging even services not located at Martha's. And then we have another version of that meeting that is also open to the public, where we also give updates and promote the kinds of outcomes and successes that we're seeing. So we do have some of that, and I will look for some other ways, including through regular social media posts. This is in the mayor's district, and she has a monthly town hall where a lot of times we provide these kind of updates. So there'll be myriad channels like that we can use.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Justin, I know you mentioned 9 to 5 operation hours. Would that be 7 days a week?
Sorry, let me look through. I have the contract in front of me. If you give me just a second. Scope of services. By the way, the on-site security is on-site a minimum of 1.5 hours prior to opening and for 1.5 hours after closing. So that's another new thing. There are terms for loitering. Patrons of the facility shall not be permitted to loiter on the subject site or on adjacent parcels. On-site security staff shall be responsible for monitoring and recording incidents of loitering. There will be video cameras for 24-hour monitoring. Alarm systems, certainly at the facility. Some of the operations that change are meant to kind of mitigate the need to just hang out. It really is a place to come and seek services, certainly to cool down on very hot days and things like that. But really, it's an access center, not just a cooling center. Sorry, I'm just trying to find the hours to confirm days of the week.
But definitely, in my opinion, all of the additional security pre and post, as well as all the cameras, gives me a lot of comfort.
Oh, we are certainly working. One of the reasons we want to keep this communication going on a very regular basis with the commission, with airport staff, with the service providers, with our police department, is because to the extent something starts to not work so well, we want to be able to respond very rapidly.
May I ask a question?
Please.
So, for you do not have a specific contract end date?
No, I don't believe we do. I'd have to look again at the term, but the intent, and these things tend to follow our appropriations process in the budget anyway. So funds would be provided for a year. There's always things like termination clauses included in these contracts. But the idea would be to continue this until such time that we develop this more robust housing first solution, and at which point we would discontinue these services or relocate them, I should say.
Mr. Chairperson, I've got a question.
Please.
So what do you see, Mr. Clifton? What is the Airport Commission's role in this, since it is airport property?
Yeah, so what I think is ideal in this case, and I do understand some of the frustration that may exist that the Airport Commission wasn't asked to advise on this matter. And you know, I certainly understand that. These governmental processes are very iterative, very participatory, but they're never meant to convey exclusivity, right? So I am also paid to advise council, but occasionally council, for one reason or other, needs to act without my advice. And that's what they've done here. I do want to emphasize that the idea of having impacts to tourism and to the airport were certainly not lost on the council, but they felt that a change was really necessary. And to some extent, the change in location and the change in providers kind of went hand in hand, because our relationship with the Well in the Desert was also through the conditional use permit that allowed their activity. So generally speaking, I think the role of this commission is to advise the council. Now, because the council has made a decision to move in this direction, I don't personally think the right advice would be to tell council they made a mistake. I do think what would make sense moving forward is for this commission to share observations that it makes with the council. So to the extent that city staff are reporting, you know, here's what we see as impacts, and that is discussed at these meetings, I think it's certainly fair game to continue to advise council on what you see as impacts to the airport and what you see as kind of ideal operations. It is within your right and purview to do what I'm suggesting I don't think is a good idea, which is to opine on whether or not this is a good or bad idea, right? To relocate these services at this location. And that's primarily because that decision has already been made. But I would continue to share your thoughts and observations moving forward. Does that make sense, the distinction?
Well, just as long as we all understand that the city council is the ultimate authority. And but I think all the commissioners take their oaths of office very seriously about advising to the city council. And so hopefully the city council understands that. I'm sure the commission, or some of the commissioners, felt a little uncomfortable not having given that advice as beforehand, so that the council had that when they made their decisions.
Yeah, I can absolutely appreciate that. And especially I appreciate the level of investment that individuals make and the passion that is felt for this facility and our other service areas where we have commissions. It's rare, I think. Mostly our processes are slow enough, frankly, to kind of have this really thorough, any relevant commission, resident stakeholders, staff research and analysis, and all that rolls up to the council. On occasion, for a variety of reasons, they need to act more expeditiously than that, and do, not just in this case, but in other cases where they feel that that's necessary. But I know that they still welcome and encourage that continued focus that a commission brings to a facility and a service like the airport that they simply couldn't provide, right? You guys spend time that they couldn't otherwise spend. You have insight that for that reason they won't otherwise have. And I know that they value that insight and want to see that continue.
Mr. Chairperson.
Go ahead, Peter.
Yes, maybe I can try and cut through the chase here. I would like to introduce a motion for all of the commissioners to consider. My motion is the following. Conversion of airport property, also known as Palm Springs Boxing Club, into a homeless shelter is not in the best interest of the airport. However, given the fact City Council, after a long search, determined that this location at the current time is the only viable option, Airport Commission concurs with the city's selection of the site. Commission also recommends that additional security personnel be hired to safeguard cars and property in the airport parking lot, especially during nighttime hours. That's my motion.
So we have a motion from Peter. Did everybody understand what the motion is?
Second the motion.
So
I'd like to amend the motion at some point.
So we have a motion from Peter and second from Rolf. This is the time to discuss and see if anybody will entertain a modification to the motion.
I have a question, Mr. Chairman.
Please.
It's related to the motion. So Justin, this is, I appreciate the effort that's gone into this and kind of where we are. I think Peter's motion kind of reflects the feeling of the commission. We've learned tonight that there's going to be security that starts at 7 or 7:15, an hour and a half before, an hour and a half later. I'd like to know, and it's related to this motion, what are the contingency plans that have been discussed about what happens when things go wrong at night? Have you, the police department, the others who are involved in this, do you have a plan that if people are sleeping at the airport, running through the airport, whatever, imagine the worst case scenarios that the other part of the city have seen with homeless when the well has not been open. What are the contingency plans that have been agreed to or put in place that will give us a level of confidence that when the security is not there and the facility is not open, that the airport will still be protected? Can you address that, please?
Sure. Thank you for the question. So the first piece of that would be what I referred to in terms of leveraging services. And these secondary impacts tend to be fairly proximate to the facility, right? That's what we saw with Bristow Park, close to the current well in the desert location. So, I am hoping and I would expect that if somebody is suspended from service, that they no longer have value being so proximate to the location. But additionally, and really separate from this, but another tool in the toolbox, we're also looking at revising administrative policies and potentially legislative ones through the council to mirror some of the policies that we're seeing put together by the city of Los Angeles. So these are sometimes referred to as sit-lie policies, where we are basically extending some of the areas. Sunrise Park that was one that was identified previously. We're extending that to all parks and even the grassy areas on the perimeter of the airport, so that it is not lawful to just sit or lie in those places. So that enables us to do something that has limits, but we think will be very effective, which is to actually tell people you can't legally just stay here and sleep here. What we cannot do, what we know we cannot do, is ban camping more generally until such time as we have adequate shelter for people. But we can select certain areas. Basically, these are time, place, and manner restrictions. They're always subject to future challenge, I think the communities that are adopting these are flirting with the constitutional line that was identified by the Ninth Circuit in the Boise v. Martin case. That's the one that said we can't prohibit camping, but we're trying to go right up to that line and identify a lot of places that for a variety of reasons, it's inappropriate to have people sitting and lying down. So with that tool in the toolbox, we should be able to 24 hours through our police department, tell people that they have to leave. Now, if despite those efforts, we still have issues, we're really going to have to deal with those in real time, the same way we do any other criminal activity. We're dealing with increased gang activity at the north end of town. We're dealing with other property related crimes and and we're always allocating our resources based on what's going on in real time and how one priority competes with the other. So we have, the police department especially, has a lot of tactics it can lean on. So I don't know if that qualifies as a kind of well-defined plan B, so to speak. But whenever we see increased activity in a place, we'll respond with resources. The tools that I just talked about are meant to make it easier to ask people to leave and to do the things that would make it easier to secure those locations.
So one more follow-up, Justin, thank you. Will the police department be willing to enforce these laws? Are they willing? Are they being directed? Have they agreed to do this, to maintain the area around the airport? I mean, is there any like gray area here in terms of just enforcing what you suggested here?
Sure, there is a gray area. For instance, if an individual is on public place and not causing a disturbance and not just kind of laying down and sleeping with all their stuff, I don't know that we would have cause to require them to leave. So there is a limit, but what we see, where we tend to see the concentrated impacts are where people are congregating for one reason or other. And one of those reasons is because you're proximate to a place like Well in the Desert where an individual is seeking services. But while they're not seeking services, they're doing all kinds of other stuff that they shouldn't do. Now, sometimes we get reports and we can't just deploy the whole team, right? So sometimes people say, hey, I see somebody doing drugs out in the open in Barristo Park. We have it a couple times in the last couple of months, had saturation type activities there, and they've worked. Now, some of those activities have come back over time when we redeploy our resources elsewhere in the community, right? But those things do work. And so the police are willing, they are being directed. The conversation we had with our legal department about adopting some of these rules that I just referred to that are coming out of Los Angeles and a couple other places as examples were meetings with the police department involved, right? So this is not just me saying, I need you to do this. This is the police department saying, we need some tools in our toolbox to be more effective and finding those best practices and adopting those. So again, one of the reasons to have much more frequent communication is so that we can close a gap between somebody who's maybe on the night shift and that sees something in the evening and whatever's happening in the daytime with leveraging services, looking for that individual to have a real heart-to-heart or other conversation that needs to be had, et cetera. I'll be honest, we didn't do a lot of that in the current situation. And it's in part because I think the relationship became strained to the point where we didn't have an active partnership. So all of these component pieces, the partnership, the increased communication, these new tools are all meant to work together. The communication is especially important because if this stuff doesn't work, then we still have to be back at the drawing board saying, what else can we do? Is it, as this motion recommended, hiring dedicated security for the parking lot, as an example? If we're seeing a lot of property crime in the parking lot, that's something we would, be smart to consider, right? So that's not sitting in the waiting as a plan B, but those are clearly things that we can go to quickly if we're out there, communicating together on a regular basis, acting quickly, and not kind of waiting for this to develop over a long time before we act.
Good explanation, Justin. Any other questions?
Mr. Chairman, may I follow up on something?
Please.
Two things. One, I would like, before the vote's taken, a rereading of what Peter had suggested. But secondly, I think a time frame is needed. I have a comfort level right now with all the efforts being taken, but I would like to see that we also suggest that this is reviewed to be renewed through the commission of where they stand as on a regular basis to show our support as it goes forward. Or not.
And one way or the other, irrespective of a commission's vote, I'm still willing to come to attend these meetings, share my perspective and information that I'm receiving, and to solicit the same from the commission.
Okay, thank you very much for that.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I want to offer two friendly amendments. Hopefully Peter will accept them, but it's up to him. One is, it's not a shelter, it's a navigation center. So I just think for accuracy, we should amend as such. The other amendment I'd like to offer is that we require the airport staff to gather incidents data on a monthly basis so that we are kept apprised of both activities that involve the police and activities that don't involve the police that relate to this, that occur on airport property off of the boxing club, which is, I think, not directly in our, it's obviously our airport property, but I think the main concern we have is what's going to happen within the confines of the airport, the parking lot, the grassy areas. And I would just like to request to Peter that we request the airport staff to gather and report on all incident data to the commission on a monthly basis.
Mr. Chairman, I have no objection to the amendment.
Okay, and what about suggestion from our other commissioner, Patricia?
Thank you. I'm very well satisfied with what was just suggested. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Mr. Chairperson, I'd like to also add an amendment that we make this a regular part of our regular agenda and on a monthly basis, have it as a formal item on the agenda, and that if there's no news or there's nothing to report to the commission, that then we just skip it for that month, but to keep track. And so all the commissioners feel like they are being kept informed, that we put this as part of the formal agenda as an item on a monthly basis.
Nadia, can you make a notation to do that, please?
Yes, I will, Mr. Chairman.
Terrific. So we have a motion and a second. If no further discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstention? Seeing none, motion passes unanimously. We move on.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Adams
Abstain.
declined,
I abstain.
abstained, sorry.
All right, I will hand over now back to Ulysses. Ulysses, you have one more item on the agenda.
Thank you, Chairman. We do have one more item here, which is 7A. And just for the record, what was just discussed was item 7B on the off the agenda. Item 7A is an introduction, a session 1 consideration of submitting priorities, areas of focus for the city council and visioning session. I provided a quick staff report that outlines the effort, but I've asked Justin Clifton to be here to introduce the effort. In your package, you also received the ordinance, which is that which establishes the commission for your reference as you contemplate priorities or area of focus that you want to submit as a commission, as well as the form, which is the document that the commission would like, I'm sorry, the council would like to receive your priorities and and focus of areas. So with that, Justin, if you want to give an overview of the council's expectations.
Sure. Thanks very much, Ulysses. Basically, I'm a fan, and I think this council has had a history of approximately annually doing some sort of visioning session that is meant to identify priorities for the upcoming year. So I arrived in April, so we're planning to do the first of these in, I believe it's late October or in November. I apologize, I don't have that date right in front of me. But one of the things that's important in the council considering overall priorities is to hear from stakeholders on what they see, especially entities like commissions that have that more hyper focus on a particular service or facility. So what we've done is staff has created a brief template that would facilitate this commission and others identifying a handful of priority topic areas and possibly priority process improvements, right? So the caveat here is the way this whole program works is there are substantially more inputs to the city council than there is capacity for throughput, right? So we've got numerous commissions. We've got 5 districts now that the council is broken up into districts. We've got agencies like PS Resorts or the Chamber of Commerce. I mean, myriad stakeholders. And one of the things that's difficult for this city and all others is to really prioritize and maintain focus, because we're always stretched thin. We're trying to do things as disparate and different as homelessness and airport operations, right? Businesses probably wouldn't get into things that are so different from one another. But that's the nature of our work. So the bottom line is we have limited capacity to do things across that broad spectrum, let alone to do many things within each individual area. You can imagine that if we ask the Sustainability Commission, what should we be focused on? They might have a list of 10 or 15 things. If we ask the Parks and Recreation Commission what we ought to be focused on, they might have a list of 10 or 15 things. If all you do is put all those things together in one list, you get an agenda that really can't be completed. So what we're trying to do, and the reason that the template provides kind of limited space, is to say if there were 1 or 2 or 3 things that are really important and timely from the perspective of this commission, what would they be? City Council still has the difficult job of looking at those 1 or 2 or 3 things across the spectrum of commissions and other stakeholders. We're also administering a community survey that will provide some valuable input. They will have the tough job of reconciling, and some of that will still not get done in a year. This operation, the airport operation, is a little different from others in that it's already guided by a long-range plan. And I think most of the big things that are kind of on the table for the next 12 months are already identified. So this exercise might look different for this commission than it would for a newly established committee like the Equity and Social Justice Committee, which is yet to convene, or the Human Rights Commission that is more focused on kind of open-ended policy rather than kind of more concrete operations. So while the exercise is a little different, we still want to advance to City Council those handful of things that you think are really important that they might consider making top priorities in the coming year. And again, if there are processes, we've kind of touched on one in this conversation, right? To what extent the commission is acting in its advisory capacity for everything related to the airport. Or some commissions I know have said, boy, we'd like to see a liaison from City Council or some more frequent process by which we get in front of council. Those are examples of the kind of process improvements we might look at. So that's essentially the exercise, and essentially, the big picture of how this component fits into, a more complete strategic retreat for council. I think you'll have time in the next couple of meetings, but by the time we meet with the City Council, I can get that date. We'll want to have that input. Does that all make sense? Are there questions about that?
Yes, definitely. Justin, you cleared it up. And what I would like to recommend the commission is that hopefully we can discuss it at our next meeting. Everybody can put their thoughts together, bring it to the meeting, and whatever decision this commission comes up with, we will then forward it to your offices.
Mr. Chairperson, may I make a suggestion to help facilitate this?
Please.
I think it might be helpful because of just the large nature of the commission, and Zoom meetings are not exactly the best to facilitate real and instant discussion. That maybe it might be helpful, and just a suggestion that you as our chairperson and maybe the vice chairperson sit down, since you're very familiar with the commission, and think of maybe 4 or 5 topics, and then you can present those to the entire commission at our regular meeting in September, and we can focus on that as opposed to going through 15, 20, 25, 30, 35 different suggestions, and just a way to help facilitate it so that we can focus and not spend unknown time in doing that. And again, this is just a suggestion, but I think at least I would trust you and the vice chair to be able to come up with a very substantial list or a shortened list that the commission might be able to discuss.
Thank you for sharing your thoughts.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I like the idea of Scott, but I would like it a little different. Maybe we should consider doing an ad hoc committee chaired by you, and we'll receive the input from all of the commissioners, and then we'll basically go to what Scott suggested, so that we basically have digested and don't bring a gazillion ideas at the next meeting, so we can sort of filter it down. So an ad hoc committee under your chairmanship, Mr. Dada, that's what I would recommend.
Thank you for your comments. Anyone else?
Yes, if I may.
Please.
My thought is, as a recommendation, would be to survey the commission real early, like next week, for input of different individuals' priorities and focuses, and then work through that to compile a list, see how different the priorities are, or see how everybody's on the same page, and then work with the chairman and the vice chairperson to dwindle that down potentially based on what is submitted, to provide that prior to the September meeting with a more focused set of priorities that then can be discussed during the meeting at the end of September.
And just to clarify, this retreat will take place November 19th and 20th. So you will also have some time in October to review this. And also for clarification, we are looking for those things that are, at least for the purposes of council's priorities, that are fairly large scale in nature, either capital projects or services. That doesn't preclude us from doing some of the other normal work of the commission or even council. That can be done in a meeting or two, but those things that tend to take substantial time because they're bigger initiatives.
And Justin, let me see if you can clear it up for us. This is for the upcoming fiscal year, not the long-term vision of the airport.
It's a little bit of both. So what, some things can't get done in 12 months, right? So for instance, if we knew that strategic priority number 1 for the airport was reconciling a future vision of rental car operations, that's the type of thing that is not done quickly or easily, right? So not only would we want to know if that's the top priority versus the second or third for the airport, but frankly, we would want to make sure that there's space on council's agenda if it was time to do that now, that they're not taking on a lot of other initiatives because that one's going to be time consuming. A lot of it would be on the staff end eventually, but early on, establishing the vision and how it impacts operations would be a lot of conversation. So that's kind of what we're trying to do, is figure out what are those big things. And maybe it's something new or something that's been discussed over the years, but It's never gotten a lot of traction, like direct international flights or something like that. But if what we hope the commission will do is work on, okay, if there are 2 or 3 or 4, or 10 of those things, what really is most important and most timely? It might be that it takes 2 years to finish. That doesn't mean we can't add another priority in the second year or whatever, but we do want to get clear on what are the most important things to do the soonest. You can do that across the spectrum of, kind of competing interests and programs.
Thank you. Any other questions? And Ulysses, I will be in touch along with the vice chair, with your office and Nadia, and we will come up with the plan. Anything else anyone's got? Seeing none, I don't think we have anything else on the agenda. I will entertain a motion to adjourn this meeting.
So
I move.
Thank you all for joining.